As the crystal glasses chimed in a celebratory toast around the private dining room at Ellsworth, Boston's most prestigious restaurant, I found myself in an exciting new phase for Sinclair Fine Foods. I beamed as Edward Kingston, the lead investor from Meridian Capital, lifted his glass with evident sincerity. After months of intense discussions, I had at last secured an $8 million investment to propel my family's specialty food business to a national level. Champagne flowed freely, the investors radiated satisfaction, and my parents appeared more joyful than I had witnessed in years. My name is Madison Sinclair. 8 years ago, I stepped away from a burgeoning finance career to rescue my parents' struggling gourmet shop. Everyone questioned my sanity for forsaking a six-figure salary for a family enterprise that was just 3 months shy of insolvency. However, I recognized potential where others saw only imminent failure. "I recall when your parents' shop was merely that small storefront in Cambridge," remarked Vivian, my former business school professor, who had connected me with the investors. "And now look at this: national distribution, an online subscription model, and those manufacturing partnerships. A truly remarkable transformation, Madison." A feeling of pride washed over me as the investors acknowledged my efforts with appreciative nods. The path had been far from easy. I had overhauled operations, revamped our product branding, forged key partnerships, and established an e-commerce platform from the ground up. Sinclair Fine Foods had evolved from a cherished local store to a burgeoning national brand, with our unique jams and artisanal condiments now being delivered to 48 states. "None of this would have been possible without Madison's vision," my father declared, raising his glass. "When Helen and I began this business 25 years ago, we never envisioned it could reach this level." My mother concurred with a smile, but a fleeting expression, a hesitation I knew all too well, crossed her face. As the investors deliberated over expansion plans I had painstakingly developed, I felt my mother's hand clasp mine beneath the table. "Madison, dear," she murmured, leaning in close enough that her perfume was all-encompassing. "This is all incredibly exciting, but please remember, when William returns from his program next month, he'll be a more suitable CEO for the family business. You've laid incredible groundwork, but he possesses the appropriate education for this scale." My brother William, the perpetually favored child, had been touring Europe for the past year after earning his MBA, rarely checking on the family business I had been painstakingly rebuilding. I maintained a steadfast smile, squeezing my mother's hand in return, but a cold dread began to settle within me. 8 years of 18-hour days, missed vacations, and a delayed personal life, and she still perceived me as merely the temporary steward of William's inheritance. "Everything all right?" Kingston inquired, noticing our hushed exchange. "Absolutely perfect," I responded, raising my glass higher, but my mind was already racing. Monday morning could not arrive soon enough. 8 years prior, I was a rising star at Morgan Stanley when my father called with news that irrevocably altered my course. The family business was on the brink of collapse. They had overextended by opening a second location, and the recession had severely impacted their luxury food sales. They were just 3 months away from permanent closure. I vividly recall my colleagues' incredulity when I tendered my resignation. "You're leaving finance to sell fancy jam?" my boss had asked, dumbfounded. Even William, then completing his undergraduate degree, had questioned my decision. "It's a sinking ship, Maddie," he had advised. "Let it go and find them something else to do." But I couldn't abandon it. Sinclair Fine Foods was more than just a shop. It was my parents' legacy. I had grown up observing them craft recipes, procure ingredients from small family farms, and cultivate personal relationships with each customer. When I departed from my finance career, I wasn't merely saving a business. I was safeguarding a family dream. The initial 2 years were grueling. I managed the front counter during the day and scrutinized spreadsheets at night. I sold our second location, renegotiated supplier contracts, and updated our accounting systems. I took out a second mortgage on my condo to finance our first e-commerce platform, then resided on a cot in the stockroom for 6 months when I couldn't manage both mortgage and rent payments. William graduated and secured an entry-level position at a consulting firm. He occasionally dispensed advice from afar, but was too preoccupied with building his own career to assist with the family business. My parents never seemed to mind his absence, consistently highlighting how he was acquiring valuable experience that would eventually benefit Sinclair Fine Foods. Meanwhile, I was revolutionizing the business. Our handcrafted preserves garnered the attention of a food blogger whose post went viral. I capitalized on that exposure by launching a subscription box service that now boasted 20,000 monthly subscribers. Last year, I established partnerships with 3 national gourmet grocery chains, boosting our revenue by 340%. Throughout all of this, my parents remained curiously ambivalent about my contributions. They were undoubtedly grateful, but an underlying current of "this is temporary" always permeated their praise. William would eventually assume control, as the firstborn and only son, an unspoken family assumption that no amount of my success seemed to alter. Madison. Kingston's voice interrupted my thoughts, bringing me back to the present. The investors were gazing at me expectantly. "I apologize," I said, regaining my composure. "Could you repeat that?" "I was inquiring about your vision for the company's leadership structure moving forward," Kingston clarified. "Your operational plan is excellent, but I want to ensure we're aligned on management." The question lingered in the air as my mother stiffened beside me. This was the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated for years. "The leadership structure will remain as it is currently," I stated deliberately, acutely aware of my mother's gaze. "I'll continue as CEO, with my parents acting as brand ambassadors and advisors to preserve the authentic family narrative that resonates with our customers." Kingston nodded, making a note. "And what about your brother? Helen mentioned he's completing an MBA program." Before I could respond, my mother interjected. "William has just finished his executive MBA at Wharton. He'll be joining the leadership team next month, bringing valuable insights from his consulting experience." I maintained a neutral expression, despite the familiar sting. William had spent a mere 3 weekends at the shop in the past 8 years, yet my mother spoke as if he had been pivotal to our growth. Kingston's gaze alternated between my mother and me, clearly perceiving the tension. "I see. And what will his role be?" "We haven't finalized that yet," I interjected swiftly. "We're concentrating on concluding this investment round first." But my mother was not finished. "William has always possessed the strongest business acumen in the family," she continued proudly. "Madison has performed admirably with the creative elements, but William comprehends the financial aspects in a way that will be essential for this expansion." I nearly choked. I had been a financial analyst before joining the family business, had restructured our entire operation, and had just secured an $8 million investment that William knew nothing about. Yet, in my mother's view, he was the business expert. I observed Kingston exchange a glance with Diane Thomas, another key investor. Something shifted in the atmosphere, a subtle reevaluation that I recognized from my years in finance. They were reassessing the deal. "Mrs. Sinclair," Kingston said cautiously, "our investment is largely predicated on Madison's track record and vision. We'd need to discuss any significant leadership alterations before finalizing the agreement." My mother appeared surprised, as if it had never occurred to her that the investors might be backing me instead of the family name. My father cleared his throat, sounding uncomfortable. Of course," he said. "We're all in agreement here. Madison has built something extraordinary, and we're merely proud parents, thrilled to have both our children involved. Nothing is set in stone." The conversation veered to less contentious topics, but the damage was done. As the dinner concluded, I noticed Kingston conversing quietly with his team, their expressions grave. When we exchanged farewells, his handshake was unusually firm. "We should talk," he murmured. "First thing Monday. Just you." I nodded, understanding perfectly. The investors had not missed my mother's meaning or the implications for their $8 million. As my parents and I traveled back in the town car, they excitedly discussed William's return, seemingly oblivious to the evening's events. I gazed out the window at the passing city lights, a plan already crystallizing in my mind. Monday was going to be very interesting indeed. I barely slept that night. By 6 a.m. on Saturday, I was at my desk in the deserted Sinclair Fine Foods headquarters, surrounded by spreadsheets, market analyses, and 8 years of documentation. The cleaning staff was surprised to see me there on a weekend, but they had become accustomed to my unconventional hours. "Miss Sinclair, everything all right?" inquired Jorge, our head of maintenance, who had been with us since I took over. "Just preparing for a significant meeting," I replied, my eyes fixed on my laptop. "Another one after that lavish dinner last night? You worked too hard, you know." I managed a smile. "I appreciate the concern, Jorge, but this one's important, perhaps the most important meeting I've ever had." After he departed, I made a call I had been contemplating for months, but had postponed out of family loyalty. "Madison, it's 6:30 on a Saturday," came Vivian's groggy voice. My former professor and mentor had always been an early riser, but even this was extreme. "I need your advice," I said directly, "and possibly your assistance." 45 minutes later, Vivian arrived with 2 coffees and a resolute expression. After I explained the situation, she sat back, studying me intently. "You've been anticipating this moment for years," she observed. "What do you truly desire, Madison?" The question hung in the air as I pondered my answer. What did I want? Recognition from my parents? The CEO position I had already been fulfilling? Or something more? "I want what I've earned," I finally declared. "And I want to cease pretending that my family values my contribution." Vivian nodded. "Then let's make some calls." By noon, I had spoken with Kingston and scheduled an emergency meeting with the investment team for Sunday morning. I had also contacted my loyal employees, Daphne from marketing, Jason from operations, and Tamara from product development, requesting their presence for an urgent strategy session. These were individuals who had been with me from the start, who had built this company alongside me while William was off finding himself before his MBA. My parents called twice, eager to discuss exciting ideas William had shared for the business. I let the calls go to voicemail. This weekend was not about William or my parents. It was about securing my future, with or without Sinclair Fine Foods. Sunday morning arrived with a knot of apprehension in my stomach. I had barely slept, running financial projections until 3 a.m. Kingston and his team arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Madison," Kingston began as they settled into our conference room, "I've been in this industry for 2 decades, and I've learned to trust my intuition. Something occurred at that dinner that troubles me." "You're right to be concerned," I said, distributing folders to each of them. Page 1 depicts the current organizational chart of Sinclair Fine Foods. Page 2 illustrates what I anticipate it will resemble if my parents have their way after the investment is finalized. The second chart displayed William as CEO, with me relegated to a nebulous creative director role, devoid of any real authority. Kingston frowned. "This was not what we discussed during our negotiations." "No," I concurred, "it was not. But it has been the unspoken plan in my family since I joined the business. Regardless of my achievements, William is the presumed heir to the company." "And what's on page 3? Inquired Diane Thomas, flipping forward in her folder. I inhaled deeply. "That's my counterproposal." The room fell silent as the investors examined the document. It detailed a new company structure, one that excluded my parents and the Sinclair name entirely. "This is unexpected," Kingston remarked finally. "You're suggesting we redirect our investment to a new entity that you would lead?" "Yes," I affirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. "Allow me to demonstrate why that makes financial sense for everyone involved." The market validation already exists, I explained, clicking through a presentation I had prepared overnight. Our customer base doesn't primarily associate with the Sinclair name. They connect with our product quality and brand narrative, both of which I created. The investors listened attentively as I detailed our sales growth. I presented customer surveys where the attributes most associated with our brand, innovation, sustainability, and community connection, were all initiatives I had spearheaded, not legacy elements from my parents' original business. What about the manufacturing relationships? Thomas inquired. Wouldn't you be starting from scratch? I shook my head. Our three principal manufacturing partners have contracts with renewal provisions coming up next quarter. I've personally maintained those relationships for years. They know who genuinely manages this business. As the meeting progressed, I presented a comprehensive business plan for a new company, one that would leverage everything I had built at Sinclair Fine Foods, but without the familial entanglements. This is impressive work for a single weekend, Kingston commented, but I suspect you've been contemplating this for much longer. I nodded. It's been my contingency plan for approximately 3 years. I've observed how my parents treat William versus how they treat me. I knew this day might arrive. After 2 hours of deliberation, Kingston leaned back in his chair. We invested in you, Madison, not just the company. The Sinclair brand possesses value, undoubtedly, but you're the visionary who transformed it. He exchanged glances with his team. We need to conduct thorough due diligence on this new approach, but I'm inclined to redirect our investment as you've proposed, with certain modifications to safeguard all parties. Relief washed over me. Thank you. I was prepared to walk away with nothing, if necessary. That wouldn't serve anyone's interest, Kingston replied, least of all ours. But I have one stipulation. You must have an honest conversation with your parents before we finalize anything. Grant them an opportunity to recognize what they're about to relinquish. I wanted to decline, to spare myself the inevitable pain of that confrontation, but I knew he was correct. I'll speak with them tonight. After the investors departed, I met with my core team, the individuals who had helped construct the company alongside me. I hadn't informed them of my contingency plan previously, uncertain if they would perceive it as disloyalty to the family business. I always suspected you had an exit strategy, Daphne remarked after I explained the situation. The way your parents discuss William, it was only a matter of time. Jason nodded. We've worked with you for years, Madison, not with the Sinclair name. Are you implying you join me? I inquired, surprised by their immediate support. Without hesitation, Tamara replied. We've already discussed it, in fact. We anticipated this day might come, particularly with William completing his MBA. The realization that my team had foreseen this scenario and had already resolved to follow me provided the final surge of confidence I required. They weren't merely employees, they were allies who acknowledged my value, even when my family did not. That evening, I drove to my parents' house with an unfamiliar sense of tranquility. For years, I had striven for recognition, attempting to prove my worth through dedication and results. But now I understood. No amount of success would ever alter how they perceived me. William would always be their chosen successor, irrespective of his minimal contribution or my proven track record. As I pulled into their driveway, my phone rang. It was William calling from the airport. Hey, Maddie, he said cheerfully. Just landed. Mom mentioned something about a significant investment. Sounds like the timing of my return couldn't be more opportune. I smiled to myself. The timing is ideal, I agreed. I'll see you tomorrow at the office. Tomorrow, Monday, when everything would change. The Sunday evening conversation with my parents unfolded precisely as I had anticipated. My mother was aghast that I would even contemplate forsaking the family legacy. My father, always the conciliator, attempted to propose a compromise where William and I could co-lead the company. I've been managing this business independently for 8 years, I reminded them. Why would I require a co-leader now, just as we're poised for expansion? William brings fresh perspectives, my mother insisted, and he's always possessed the strongest business mind in the family. Based on what evidence? I inquired, struggling to maintain an even tone. His consulting job that he abandoned after 2 years? His MBA that I financed while reinvesting my salary into rescuing our company? My father appeared pained. Madison, please understand. This was always the intention. William is the firstborn. I'm 37 years old, I interrupted. I've augmented company revenue by 3,000% since assuming control. I secured an $8 million investment based on my vision and execution. But none of that matters because William was born first? Because he's your son and not your daughter? The ensuing silence communicated everything. Everything I needed to know. They had no defense except tradition and preference. The investors are backing me, not the family name, I stated finally. You have until tomorrow morning to decide whether you want to acknowledge that reality or forfeit everything I've built. I departed, leaving them stunned in their living room, a family photograph from my childhood gazing down at us from above the fireplace, William front and center, me slightly off to the side. It had always been that way, I realized. I simply hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. I had arranged for the investors to meet me at the office at 9 a.m., aware that my parents typically arrived at 8:30, and William had texted that he would join for his first day at 8:45. I arrived at 7:30, affording myself time to center my thoughts and prepare for the impending events. To my surprise, Daphne, Jason, and Tamara were already present, along with approximately a dozen other key employees. What? What are you all doing here so early? I inquired. Daphne smiled. We wanted you to know you're not alone in this. Whatever transpires today, we're with you. The gesture nearly overwhelmed me, but I managed a grateful nod before retreating to my office to review my notes one final time. At 8:30 sharp, my parents entered, their expressions tense but resolute. My mother was dressed formally, as if for a crucial presentation. My father appeared weary, the previous night's argument clearly weighing on him. At 8:42, William strolled in, sporting an expensive suit and radiating the casual confidence of someone who has never had to struggle for recognition. He greeted employees he barely knew with handshakes and pronouncements of how thrilled he was to assume the helm of the family business. I observed from my glass-walled office as he worked the room, already embodying the role of CEO without having earned a single moment of it. My mother beamed with pride, highlighting various operational aspects to him, as if he were a visiting dignitary rather than someone who should have been in the trenches with us for the past 8 years. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., the elevator doors opened, and Kingston entered with his investment team and 2 individuals I recognized as partners from Meridian Capital's legal department. The atmosphere in the office shifted instantaneously, employees sensing that something momentous was about to unfold. My mother hastened over, extending her hand. Mr. Kingston, we're so delighted you're here. I'd like to introduce you to my son, William. He's just returned from... Kingston interrupted her, politely but firmly. Actually, Mrs. Sinclair, we're here to speak with Madison. However, I believe it would be advantageous for all of you to join us in the conference room. The moment of truth had arrived. The conference room felt charged with tension as everyone took their seats, my parents and William on one side, the investment team on the other, with me at the head of the table. Years of unspoken family dynamics were about to collide with cold, hard business reality. Kingston opened his briefcase and presented several documents. Before we commence, I wish to clarify something crucial. Meridian Capital's investment was approved based on Madison's leadership and vision for this company. Our due diligence centered on her track record, her team, and her growth strategy. William shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother's smile became strained. Since Friday evening's conversation, Kingston continued, we've had to reassess our position. It's become evident that there may be some discrepancy in expectations regarding the company's future leadership. My father cleared his throat. We've always envisioned Sinclair Fine Foods as a genuine family enterprise, with both our children contributing their distinct strengths. With all due respect, Mr. Sinclair, Diane Thomas interjected, our investment was predicated on continuity of leadership. Madison has exhibited exceptional business acumen, growing this company from near bankruptcy to a national contender. Any significant alteration to that leadership constitutes a material modification to our agreement. William leaned forward, the confidence in his voice belying his complete lack of involvement in the company for the past 8 years. I can assure you that my executive MBA and consulting experience render me well qualified to... To what? Kingston inquired bluntly. To supplant the individual who salvaged this company? Who augmented its valuation by 3,000%? Who secured this investment in the first place? The room fell silent. My mother's face had turned ashen, her eyes flitting between William and Kingston. We have a proposition, Kingston announced, sliding a folder toward my parents. 2 alternatives, in fact. I recommend you examine them meticulously. My parents opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were 2 legal documents. The first delineated the original investment deal, but with explicit language guaranteeing I would remain CEO for a minimum of 5 years, with William restricted to a non-executive role. The second document was something else entirely, a term sheet for a $10 million investment in a new company, one that would be established and led by me, with no connection to the Sinclair name or family ownership. What is this? My father inquired, his voice barely audible. Insurance, I replied calmly. In case you still fail to comprehend what's genuinely valuable about this company. William snatched the second document, his face reddening as he scanned its contents. You're threatening to initiate a competing business? Your own family? I'm safeguarding the value I've created, I corrected him. Value that you played no part in constructing, William. Where were you when I was sleeping on a cot in the stockroom to meet payroll? When I was personally delivering orders because we couldn't afford shipping fees? When I was redesigning our entire product line while simultaneously working the register? My mother appeared devastated. Madison, you can't possibly intend to abandon your family legacy. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened. Daphne entered, followed by Jason, Tamara, and at least 15 other employees, many of whom had been with the company for years. Excuse the interruption, Daphne said, her voice clear and unwavering. But we wish to make something known. If Madison departs to establish a new company, we accompany her. All of us. The room erupted in whispers. My parents stared in disbelief at the assembled employees, the very core of the company they believed they controlled. The decision is yours, I stated softly. Acknowledge what I've constructed and who constructed it, or witness me depart with everything that renders this company valuable. For nearly 10 minutes, the only sound in the conference room was the rustling of papers as my parents and William scrutinized the documents before them. Kingston and his team waited patiently. The employees who had come to stand with me remained at the edges of the room, a visual testament to where the company's true value resided. Finally, my father sighed heavily and pushed the first document forward. We'll sign this one, he said, his voice laden with defeat. Madison remains as CEO. My mother's lips were pressed into a thin line, but she nodded in agreement. William appeared shell-shocked, his meticulously crafted future disintegrating before his eyes. A wise decision, Kingston said, signaling for his legal team to finalize the paperwork. 2 hours later, it was concluded. The investment would proceed, with explicit safeguards for my position. William would join the company as Vice President of Business Development, a role with defined boundaries and a reporting structure that positioned him under me. My parents would transition to brand ambassadors, relinquishing day-to-day operations entirely. That was 6 months ago. Today, Sinclair Fine Foods is flourishing. Our national expansion is exceeding expectations, and our new product lines have surpassed sales projections by 40%. From the outside, we appear to be a heartwarming narrative of family entrepreneurship. The reality is more intricate. I maintain a strictly professional rapport with my parents and William. Our interactions are cordial but confined to business matters. I attend the obligatory family dinners on holidays, but I no longer seek their approval or recognition. Some wounds do not heal. They simply become integral to one's identity. The betrayal imparted a valuable lesson. My worth is not contingent upon my family's acknowledgement of it. My true family is the team that stood behind me that Monday morning, prepared to relinquish security for the sake of loyalty and fairness. I may bear the Sinclair name on my business cards, but my genuine legacy is entirely my own.